All right, so remember the big three. So we already went through each one. Okay, so the vertex, that's where we're at. We're at the vertex and the axis of symmetry. Okay? So thinking about it graphically, what we're currently trying to find is this dashed line and this point that lies on the dashed line. Okay, so those are the two things that we're trying to find right now. Okay, so if we go over here, our equation right here, x equals negative b over 2a. This equation is the equation for our axis of symmetry line. Okay, that is our axis of symmetry line. Okay, so instead of just kind of thinking about it, abstractly, let's do an example. So let's go down here to number 1 and find our axis of symmetry line. Okay, I'm going to abbreviate axis of symmetry AOS. Okay, just so I don't have to write it all out. So AOS. All right, so remember my formula is negative b over 2a. Okay, negative b over 2a. All right, so what's negative b? Good, 10. So it's just the opposite of b. And then 2 times a, well, a is just 1, right? So it's just 10 divided by 2. All right, so 10 over 2 just simplifies to 5. All right, so x is equal to 5. Okay, is everybody good with how I just got that axis of symmetry? You just got to plug in those values just like the quadratic formula. Okay, does anybody have any questions on axis of symmetry? All right, so let's get a visual. So what exactly did I just calculate? So we're graphing, right? So if I have my x and my y-axis here, I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and at 5, I now have a dashed line. Okay, so that is what I just found. So right now I just found my mirror, basically. Okay, I found my mirror. All right, let's go back over here. All right, so now if we scroll up here, it says to find our vertex, we're going to use that same x that we just found in our axis of symmetry and plug it back in to get y. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Let's look at that. All right, so f of x is just a fancy way of writing y. Okay, so basically our equation says y equals x squared minus 10x plus 2. So if I replace my x values with a value, I'm going to get out a y, right? So if I plug in something for x, I'm going to get out a y. So that's essentially what I'm doing, okay? So I'm going to use this value that I got for my axis of symmetry. So I'm going to use 5 to calculate my y. So my vertex then is going to be 5 squared minus 10 times 5 plus 2. Okay, so basically what I did was just take that equation and everywhere I saw an x, I put a 5 in its place. Okay, that's going to give me out my y value that I want. Okay, so go ahead and practice typing into your calculators. So 5 squared and then minus 10 times 5 plus 2. You can do it in chunks if you want. So if you want to do 5 squared and then get that answer. And yep. Do what? Yep, you'll have to use PEMDAS. Yep. All right, does somebody want to share what they got?
I'm not finished.
Okay, negative 23 sounds good. So keep working it out if you haven't finished yet and see if you can get negative 23. All right, so remember my vertex that we learned last time is a single point, right? It's a single point that lies on our axis of symmetry, okay? So a single point, remember, any point that we ever plot is written as x, y, right? It's an x and then a y. So how far you're going to walk and then how far you're going to climb, okay? So you're going to use x first and then y, right? It's a coordinate point, okay? So we're going to use this same x. So our x is 5, just like it was on our axis of symmetry. And then when we plugged 5 in, we got negative 23. So it's 5, and then negative 23 is our vertex. Okay, so these two numbers right here, this 5 and this.
Haven't we kind of done something like this before?
Probably.
Wait a minute.
So that 5 and that 5 should always be the same. Okay, and then that negative 23 is whatever answer you get when you plug 5 into your equation. Okay, so that's axis of symmetry and vertex. Okay, does anybody have any questions on axis of symmetry or vertex? Do you want to do another example?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go down to number 3.
Can we try doing it on our own? And then
What?
can we try doing it on our own?
No, I'm going to go through one more guided, and then you can practice a lot on your own today, I promise. Okay, so axis of symmetry, negative b, oops, that was bad. Negative b over 2a. Okay, so remember negative b is what? Go to positive 8. And then 2 times negative 2 would be a negative 4. Okay, so I'm just going to think about simplifying that fraction, 8 over negative 4. And if I do that, I'm going to get negative 2. Okay, so x is going to be equal to negative 2. Okay.
So it's going to be like your first one.
Yep, so now I'm going to work on my vertex since I'm done with my axis of symmetry. Remember, the first point of my vertex is always that same negative 2 that I just found. And now I need to find my y. Okay? The way to find my y is to plug in negative 2 for x. So everywhere I see an x, I'm going to write negative 2. Okay, so your equation should look something like that. Okay, so this piece right here, so negative 2 squared would just be 4. And then times negative 2, I get negative 8. Okay, this piece right here, 8 times negative 2 would be negative 16. So instead of doing minus a negative 16, you can think about it as adding, so plus a positive. Finally, and then plus 5. Okay, so if you broke that up, or you can just type it all into your calculator at the same time, however you want to do it. You should get 13. Positive. So positive 13 when you plug in negative 2 to your equation. So your vertex then is going to be negative 2, 13. Okay, are these examples helping? Are we kind of seeing what we're doing?
Yeah, this is light.
What?
This is light.
Oh, yeah, Devin.
Okay, so since it's negative b over 2a, if b is already negative, it becomes a positive.
Right. So if you think about it, b would be negative 8. So if you want to think about negative b, you just flip the sign. So since it's already negative, then yeah, it would be a positive. Yep, good question. All right, anybody else have a question? All right, let's move on to the second thing of our big 3. Okay, so that's the first one is axis of symmetry and vertex. All right, I will tell you that the other 2 are much easier. Okay, so for your zeros that you're going to find, so remember zeros are what intersect the x-axis. Okay, so this would be a 0, and this would be a 0. So my blue dots are zeros. What? No.
You can't use Desmos on your test surface.
You can check your answers using Desmos.
That's what I tried to say.
Hold on, go back.
No, but she wants you to like know Desmos, but not to get answers on your test.
Right. All right, so for finding those zeros, look at what you have to do to find them. Factoring or quadratic formula. Okay, factoring or quadratic formula. Okay, I will tell you, hint, hint, quadratic formula is always going to work. Every single time quadratic formula works. So I'm going to write always works. There will be times that factoring works, but factoring is not consistently able to be used, okay? So if I were you, if you want less work, I would just quadratic formula every single time, okay? If you want to learn maybe like when it's appropriate to use factoring, when it's not, I would say that's like an AL one-on-one with Miss Kidman conversation, okay? So I'm not going to go over that in class. I'm just going to tell you to always use quadratic formula, okay? Okay. All right, so we'll practice that later, but I'm not going to worry about it too much since you guys know how to do the quadratic formula. Okay? And finally, y-intercept. This is the easiest one, you guys. All you have to do is you put down a 0 in the x spot, and you put down whatever value of c the equation gives you in the y spot. So this c up here, so in your equation, this c is going to be your same c down here. Okay, so your equation gives you your y-intercept, which is nice. Okay, so it's going to be 0 and then whatever value of c. All right, so let's scroll down to one of the examples that we just did. Let's go down to number 1. Okay, number 1. And then we're going to add those 2 new skills that we learned to number 1. Okay, so the first one would be zeros.
You mean number 2?
No, I just need more room, so I'm going over here and writing zeros. Okay, so if I go over here, I look at my equation. So x squared minus 10x plus 2. All right, so I need to use quadratic formula on that. Just rewriting it. Okay, so remember we're not doing number 2, I'm doing this one. All right, so for zeros, I'm going to do quadratic formula, so negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so negative b is still just be 10, right? All right, so then b squared would be 100, just 10 times 10. And then I'm just going to write in a, which is just 1, and c, which is 2, and then all over 2 times 1, which is just 2. Okay, is everybody good plugging in stuff to the quadratic formula?
Wait, where did the 100 begin?
The 100 is 10 squared. Yep, b squared should be 10 squared. Okay, so now remember, doing the quadratic formula, I need to enter this piece into my calculator. So negative 4 times 1 times 2. Remember, whatever calculator answer I get, I'm going to add. So I'm going to add negative 8, right? When you plug that in your calculator, you got negative 8. Okay. So then 100 minus 8 then would be 92, right? Okay. All right, once you get to here, so once you have one number under your radical, you're allowed to stop. Okay? So now you can just plug that into your calculator. Okay, so you're ready to plug that in. So if I were you, I would recommend doing the square root of 92 in your calculator first, and then adding 10. Okay, and then dividing by 2. Okay, because your calculator is not smart enough to know the order of operations and do all of that for you. Okay, so you're going to have to kind of help your calculator out a little bit. All right, so your first answer then is x equals about 9.8. And your second answer,
Wait, how do we do that? How do you get 9.8?
I did see where I got this answer right here, Lennon. I plugged it in my calculator. Oops. That's how I got 9.8.
Plus or minus?
I did plus. And then for the minus answer, I got 0.2. Okay. Was everybody able to get those, or at least one of them so far? Okay. I'll hang tight a little bit, that way you guys can. The zeros are pretty good. All right, so there's our zeros. All right, so the last thing is our y-intercept. Okay, so remember our y-intercept is just 0, and then whatever value of c we have. So in this equation, our c value is 2. So our y-intercept is just 0, 2. So no calculations, you just get to pull your numbers from your equation. So 0, 2. Okay, so now we have all of this information. Look at all of that information that you have. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to have you do, I need all of your focus. All right, so I want you to work on number 4 at your groups. Okay, so we're going to walk around. So remember, here are the things that you're going to need to calculate. Your axis of symmetry, which is just negative b over 2a. You're going to need your vertex, which is going to be an xy coordinate. You are going to need your zeros, which you're going to use quadratic formula. And lastly, you are going to do your y-intercept, which is just 0, and then your c value. Okay, so go ahead and work in your groups. See if you can do all of those. All right, so for this one, axis of symmetry, remember negative b over 2a. So negative b over 2a. All right, so in this case, negative b would be negative 6. Over 2a would also be 2 times negative 3, which is just negative 6. So we get x is equal to 1. Okay, x is equal to 1. All right, remember for our vertex, we keep that 1 out in our x place. All right, and all we do to find y is everywhere we see an x, we plug in a 1, or whatever value we get for our axis of symmetry. All right, so if you do that correctly, you should get your vertex equal to 4. Is that what you guys got? 4? Okay, so 1, 4 should be your vertex. Okay, so there's our axis of symmetry. There's our vertex. All right, for our zeros, we are going to use the quadratic formula. Okay. All right, so negative b, we already talked about, was negative 6. Okay, b squared would just be 6 squared, or 6 times 6. So we get 36. Minus 4, and then times ac. So a would be negative 3, and c would just be 1. And then all over 2 times a, which we already talked about from our axis of symmetry, which once again is negative 6. All right, is everybody good plugging in all those values? Okay, it's kind of a lot. All right, so now we're going to do that calculator part. So negative 4 times negative 3 times 1. Okay, and that'll get you 12, right? So we're going to add 12 to our 36. Okay, so add 12. All right, so if we add 12 to 36, we're going to get 48. Okay. All right, and then what you're going to do is plug that into your calculator. All right, so you can plug in -6 plus. If you're using your iPad calculator, you type in 48, the square root button, then you must hit equals after that, okay? Then divide by -6. All right, if you're unsure how to plug it in your calculator, just come talk to me either after class really fast or come see me during AL and we can chat about that, okay? All right, somebody who put it in their calculator, what did you get for your 2 zeros? Okay. What'd you get? 0.21? 0.29? Is that what everybody else got? No? Okay, what did other people get? 2.15? Okay, that's what I got. -0.15? Okay, that's what I got. Devin, did you have 48 under your radical? Okay, well. Okay. All right, cool. All right, so 2.5 and then -0.15 should be our zeros. All right, and finally, the easiest one of them all, our y-intercept is just 0, 1. Okay, so it's always 0 out front, and then whatever our c value is, which in our case is 1.
So we could technically do the y-intercept at any point.
Oh, yeah. I just save it for last because after all this work, it's just like, oh, okay, great.
I just want to do it first, just to get it out.
Hey, if you want to do that, then you do that. All right, so now the most important point of this lesson is now that we solved all of these things, now we have to put it on a graph, right? Okay? So this is the easiest part though, I promise. It really is. Okay? So we have our graph here. Okay, so there's our graph. Oh my goodness. I don't know if this is what I want to do. Okay, so there's my graph. All right, so for my axis of symmetry, I'm going to go over 1. What in the world is this? I don't really know how that happened. Come on. All right, so for my x equals 1. So at 1, so I'm going to go over 1 on my x-axis and then draw my vertical dashed line. Okay. Remember, my vertex is going to fall somewhere on that line. So in this case, it's going to fall at 1, 4. So I'm going to go over 1 and then up 1, 2, 3, 4 and draw my point. Okay, so here is my axis of symmetry and my vertex. Okay, now to plot my zeros, okay, think of this x-axis right here as a number line. So I'm going to go over 2.15, so 1, 2, and then a little bit more. Okay, and then I'm going to go over -0.15. Okay, so that'd be somewhere over there. It does not have to be exact, but when you're doing your zeros, just think of your x-axis as a number line. Okay, so you're not going anywhere on the y-axis, you're only going on the x-axis. Okay?
And then is this where we draw our arch?
Almost. We haven't drawn the y-intercept yet. So the y-intercept is at 0, 1. Okay, but remember I told you that any point that you draw on one side, you can reflect over onto the other, right? So I'm going to count over to see I only move 1 unit to get to my axis of symmetry. So then I'm going to go over that 1 unit on the other side. Okay, so you should be able to kind of draw another dot, kind of like a mirror.
Wait,
They're all labeled in their color. So the blue ones are the zeros, the pink ones are the y-intercept, and then the vertex is purple.
wait, is AOS and normal vertex the same thing?
The AOS is the axis of symmetry. So remember, that's like your mirror. That's what allows you to flip everything back and forth. And then your vertex is on your axis of symmetry. Okay, and then after you plot all of those points, then you just draw your U. Okay? Just draw your U.